Hey guys, Mark here, bringing you another Nintendo Box video, and I have a discussion for you today, again with Andy from Macintyre Productions and Conrad from the Commonwealth Realm, and it's going to be a good one. It's all speculation, and it's about the NX. So today we've actually heard a rumor that the NX may actually be looking towards a $150 price mark, and this rumor came from the same guy that told us a while back that there was a Diddy Kong Racing 2 in production for the Wii and then the Wii U, and he also says that that's been moved over to the NX. So, Conrad and Andy, what do you think to this rumor? Personally, I think a $150 price mark is far too low.
Well, at first glance, this particular new statement is a bit jarring. I'll admit, $150 for a particular console. Like, not even I believe a new 3DS costs particular that low, and that's handheld we're talking about here. So that $150 price point, I don't necessarily see that could be a plausible thing we could be talking about here, since if we look at Nintendo's handhelds, for instance, I think aside from the 2DS, most of the handhelds are above that particular price range. At least I believe so, and I don't necessarily believe that could be the case. Right now, there's a lot of particular speculation floating up in the air, but $150 price point, even though I would like for that to happen, I don't think that's necessarily a plausible thing to really think about.
The hardware you could get for $150, it's nothing compared to, let's say, the PC qualities you have of this day. The NX needs to be more powerful than the Wii U has been to this point, and you won't get enough powerful enough hardware for that price tag. So I think that Nintendo needs to realize that the casual market that they had with the Wii is gone and will not return. They have moved over to tablets, and they are playing small games that require in-app purchases. And we see Nintendo is also going into those waters at this moment. But at the same time, I think that Nintendo on the console market needs to do basically one thing, and that is the fusion between the handheld market and the console market, because that way they will be able to give out a steady stream of new releases of first-party titles in case they can fail on or getting enough support from third-party developers such as Ubisoft, EA, and so on.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that you brought up that point about what you think that it maybe should be. I just want to know more about what you guys would actually want the NX to be in an ideal world, and what kind of price point you would expect it to come to, kind of power-wise and concept-wise.
Well, what I would typically want within this new mysterious NX is that I do agree with Conrad's statement that he wants to see the fusion between the handheld and console markets. So I would definitely would like to see that particular console to have a good component of power to it, a lot of CPU and RAM to really rival the amounts, at least a bit, with PS3 and Xbox One, but in a sense kind of surpass it. But I can understand why that's not Nintendo's primary focus as of the moment. Well, interesting thing is that there was some news coming out that Miyamoto is no longer making hardware decisions over at Nintendo, which I think is a pretty good thing. Don't get me wrong, I believe Miyamoto is a genius, but his time is coming to a close, which is sad to say. And I do want to see other minds over at Nintendo, other younger minds that have fresher perspectives on the company and the market in general, to give their take into it as well. So I'm curious to think what the NX is going to be in terms of scope, and in terms of a price, I definitely believe it's going to be around like the $250 range somewhere, give or take. And in terms of the library that this particular NX would have, like I recently saw this one interesting comment, and he pretty much stated that the GameCube had a lot of third-party support. It was practically swimming in it, but it still sold less. And that's the thing about the GameCube. It had Resident Evil 4 as a particular exclusive, and it had all these particular games, but yet it still sold less. And why is that? And it was, from what I can understand, the main reason behind that is because there was not a whole lot of, what was it called again? Localization or something like that, a lot of marketing towards that particular end. So I believe if Nintendo really marketed their particular console, same thing what they did with Splatoon, because since Splatoon is a massive success, as we all know, then I can pretty much be confident that the NX would be a success as well.
Basically, the reason why the PS2 won the sixth generation of console gaming was because of the DVD player that was included. And I believe that that was one of the main reasons why people bought a PS2 instead of a GameCube and an Xbox, since they got a free DVD player that were rather pricey at that point. Another thing that makes it difficult for game developers to port games to the Wii U today is that most games are being developed for Blu-ray CDs, which take much more capacity compared to the CDs you have on the Wii U. So I believe that the NX needs to do a rather vast leap from the Wii U, both in terms of its, especially its power, since we all know that the Wii U has been underpowered compared to the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. We're talking about ratio 2 to 3 times weaker GPU compared to the PS4 and Xbox One, and it's not even comparable when we talk about PC. So what I basically want to see from the NX is a more powerful console that embodies what Nintendo has been all about since 1983, basically gaming, and that's also what I hope the NX will be, since the Wii U has been a half-hearted attempt at getting back to the hardcore market. Had the motion control gimmick with the overpriced, or at least pricey, gamepad that has been little to not at all been utilized in game development for the Wii U.
Yes, so I'm thinking of what the actual input would be. Of course, Conrad, you bring up Blu-rays, which is one option that Nintendo could do. Now, it's odd that they don't use a universal disc format like that. They use a proprietary one, I believe, right now. Definitely not a DVD drive. But there has been some talk of going back to some kind of cartridge system, which obviously wouldn't be like an N64 cartridge. It would be something different, something with more capacity. But what do you think to that idea? I'm definitely unsure on it myself. I think that it may not lure in the third parties.
Well, Conrad, you brought in a really, really interesting statement that kind of just goes back to the one GameCube example and PS2 example that we just brought up here. And the GameCube was, in terms of hardware, alienated developers in the sense that they use a particular type of disc. I forgot the name of the particular disc they used, eludes me. It was a much more smaller disc, and it made it much more difficult for third-party developers to really transport their particular hardware in there, which kind of made the GameCube a bit alienated in terms of developers. Which you could argue the same thing occurred with the Wii U, since the hardware on the Wii U is obviously different than what it is on the Xbox One or PS4 or the previous generation of consoles. The main reason for that is because Microsoft and Sony are computer companies. They develop computers. And Nintendo is obviously not a computer company. They develop their machines entirely differently from them. And so what I would like to see from the NX is to pretty much make their machines, in a sense, kind of comparable to computers, which I'll probably get some sort of weird gazes at, but I believe if they kind of just make it more accommodating towards developers worldwide, including those in the West, they could just bring more incentive towards developers to just develop more hardware into there and not really alienate developers like what happened with the GameCube and what we saw in the Wii U.
I definitely agree with you there, Andy, since the Wii U has in many ways failed based on three different aspects. The one thing is the confusion. The second was the marketing following its initial release. It was not too well thought out. And the final nail in the coffin, which also Review Check USA brought up, was the pricing and the storage, since the original white Wii U, the basic model, had only 8 GB hard drive storage, internal hard drive storage, and the same goes with the deluxe model, the black one that is still at sale today with its 32 GB. In this day of age, when we download games to directly from the eShop to a console. 32 gigabytes is basically nothing if you download an entire game from digitally from the eShop or different console stores. So what I believe that the NX should do is basically have at least 500 gigabytes of storage, or perhaps even 1 terabyte, since we see today that both the PS4 and the Xbox One owners struggle with 500 gigabytes. I think that the NX should have enough storage, since the storage we had in the Wii U was basically a joke compared to the competition storage.
So even at the time, the Wii U's amount of storage was laughable. It's never been good. It wasn't even appropriate at the time of release. And that goes without saying, of course. But going on to the games, what kind of launch games would you like to see the NX launch with, and what kind of games do you think that we are realistically going to see it launch with? Because personally, I think there's quite a lot of hope, and well-placed hope, that it will launch with quite a good set of games.
There's two things I really want to see as a launch title or launch titles for the NX. One would be obviously a Metroid game, which we've been kind of been let down with Federation Force. But what Conrad has so generously preferred in the past, that we would definitely like to see a true open world Metroid game that delivers a much more expansive style, that isolation and exploration, things of that sort. Kind of similar to that No Man's Sky, which I'm very, very excited to play actually. And the second title I would very much like to see is a brand new IP. Just something just to give Nintendo or the NX a fresh start, like something new. I'm not sure what that particular IP should be, but it should be something like fun, colorful, something like Splatoon obviously had done in the past, and kind of just uses the hardware of the NX towards its own advantage to deliver whatever gameplay mechanics it can deliver.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Andy with Metroid, and especially probably a continuation of the Metroid Prime series as a launch title for the NX, just to demonstrate the power of the console and the graphical and artistic capabilities of the new hardware. But at the same time, I believe that the Zelda game should be the next Zelda game, or Zelda Wii U, should also have a dual release as a launch title for the NX. We saw what kind of wonders Twilight Princess did for the Wii, starting it as the hard core alternative to Wii Sports, which appealed to the casual game.
Yeah, I think that would be a brilliant time to launch it with those games, and potentially a Mario too. But Conrad, with you bringing up Zelda Wii U having a dual release on the Wii U and the NX, which is something that I could definitely see as well, is it that you two are expecting it to launch in late 2016?
Personally, I believe that the NX will arrive in 2016, and that is because financially Nintendo cannot afford to support the Wii U anymore. And it appears that Nintendo is more than ready to share details about the NX on the E3 next year. And let's remember the reveal of the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. It just came a couple of months before its launch. So I think that we could see the successor to the Wii U already next October, November, with the release of Zelda Wii U, and then the dual release Zelda NX. Most probably we'll just get a Metroid announcement at E3 next year for the console, and then we'll probably see a situation just like Metroid Prime Corruption, where the game will come out the year after. So we will have a Zelda game as the release title and the launch title for the NX, and then the Metroid will come the year after.
And I do want to point out that this year's E3 with Nintendo's digital events, Nintendo America President Reggie Fils-Aimé did state that we will see the NX or some new hardware at next E3, which also plays into what Conrad said, that I myself also find it very, very plausible that we will see new hardware come 2016, and possibly a release of that particular year. And I also suspect there's going to be a live press conference instead of a digital event for next year's E3, since I can't really imagine just showing off new hardware at a digital event, which doesn't really give the same vibe and aura as it would during a live press conference. So I do suspect that the NX will be revealed at a live press conference next year's E3, and we'll probably see a brand new lineup of what the NX should offer, and which my hope is we'll see a new Metroid, but from recent interviews with Kensuke Tanabe, kind of clarified that a Metroid game was never really in development to begin with, or at least nothing aside from Federation Force, which is very depressing since they kind of just threw Metroid under the bus again, which I kind of thought I was thinking they wouldn't do that ever since the advent of Other M, but what can you do?
I totally agree with everything you guys have said. That's where my opinion lies, and I think that brings us to the end of this video. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Maka from Nintendo Box.
Andy, Macintyre Productions.
Conrad, Commonwealth Realm.
If you want to check these two guys out, there'll be links in the description down below. Thank you very much for watching. Bye bye.